The Euphrates is the longest and one of the most historically important rivers of Western Asia. Together with the Tigris, it is one of the two defining rivers of Mesopotamia. Originating in eastern Turkey, the Euphrates flows through Syria and Iraq to join the Tigris in the Shatt al-Arab, which empties into the Persian Gulf. History: Paleolithic to Chalcolithic periods. The early occupation of the Euphrates basin was limited to its upper reaches, that is, the area that is popularly known as the Fertile Crescent. Achaiolian stone artifacts have been found in the Sidr basin and in the El Kaum oasis in the central Syrian steppe, the latter together with remains of Homo erectus that were dated to 450,000 years old. In the Taurus Mountains and the upper part of the Syrian Euphrates Valley, early permanent villages such as Abu Huraira, at first occupied by hunter-gatherers but later by some of the earliest farmers, Jurf al-Amr, Muribit and Nevil Sori, became established from the 11th millennium BCE onward. In the absence of irrigation, these early farming communities were limited to areas where rainfed agriculture was possible, that is, the upper parts of the Syrian Euphrates as well as Turkey. Late Neolithic villages, characterized by the introduction of pottery in the early 7th millennium BCE, are known throughout this area. Occupation of Lower Mesopotamia started in the 6th millennium and is generally associated with the introduction of irrigation, as rainfall in this area is insufficient for dry agriculture. Evidence for irrigation has been found at several sites dating to this period, including Tel es-Salwan. During the 5th millennium BCE, or late Ubad period, northeastern Syria was dotted by small villages, although some of them grew to a size of over 10 hectares, 25 acres. In Iraq, sites like Erdu and Dur were already occupied during the Ubad period. Clay boat models found at El Mashnika along the Khabur indicate that riverine transport was already practiced during this period. The Ruk period, roughly coinciding with the 4th millennium BCE, saw the emergence of truly urban settlements across Mesopotamia. Cities like Tel Brak and Ruk grew to over 100 hectares, 250 acres, in size and displayed monumental architecture. The spread of southern Mesopotamian pottery, architecture and ceilings far into Turkey and Iran has generally been interpreted as the material reflection of a widespread trade system aimed at providing the Mesopotamian cities with raw materials. Habuba Kabira on the Syrian Euphrates is a prominent example of a settlement that is interpreted as an Uruk colony. Ancient history: during the Jemdet Nasr, 3600 to 3100 BCE, and early dynastic periods, 3100 to 2350 BCE, southern Mesopotamia experienced a growth in the number and size of settlements, suggesting strong population growth. These settlements, including Sumero-Akkadian sites like Sipr, Ruk, Adab and Kish, were organized in competing city-states. Many of these cities were located along canals of the Euphrates and the Tigris that have since dried up, but that can still be identified from remote sensing imagery. A similar development took place in Upper Mesopotamia, sub-Urartu and Assyria, although only from the mid-3rd millennium and on a smaller scale than in Lower Mesopotamia. Sites like Ebla, Mari and Tel Leilin grew to prominence for the first time during this period. Large parts of the Euphrates basin were for the first time united under a single ruler during the Akkadian Empire, 2335 to 2154 BC, and Ur-3 empires, which controlled, either directly or indirectly through vassals, large parts of modern-day Iraq and northeastern Syria. Following their collapse, the Old Assyrian Empire, 1975 to 1750 BCE, and Mari asserted their power over northeast Syria and northern Mesopotamia, while southern Mesopotamia was controlled by city-states like Hizeh, Kish and Larsa before their territories were absorbed by the newly emerged state of Babylonia under Hammurabi in the early to mid-18th century BCE. In the second half of the second millennium BCE, the Euphrates basin was divided between Kassite Babylon in the south and Mitanni, Assyria and the Hittite Empire in the north, with the Middle Assyrian Empire, 1365 to 1020 BC, eventually eclipsing the Hittites, Mitanni and Kassite Babylonians. Following the end of the Middle Assyrian Empire in the late 11th century BCE, struggles broke out between Babylonia and Assyria over the control of the Iraqi Euphrates basin. The Neo-Assyrian Empire, 935 to 605 BC, eventually emerged victorious out of this conflict and also succeeded in gaining control of the northern Euphrates basin in the first half of the first millennium BCE. In the centuries to come, control of the wider Euphrates basin shifted from the Neo-Assyrian Empire, which collapsed to the short-lived Median Empire and equally brief Neo-Babylonian Empire in the last years of the 7th century BC, and eventually to the Achaemenid Empire. The Achaemenid Empire was in turn overrun by Alexander the Great, who defeated the last king Darius III and died in Babylon in 323 BCE. Subsequent to this, the region came under the control of the Seleucid Empire, 312 to 150 BC, Parthian Empire, during which several Neo-Assyrian states such as Osroene and Adiabene came to rule certain regions of the Euphrates, and was fought over by the Roman Empire, its succeeding Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Empire, until the Arab invasion and accompanying Islamic conquest of the mid-7th century AD. Modern era. After World War I, the borders in Southwest Asia were redrawn in the Treaty of Lausanne, when the Ottoman Empire was partitioned. Clause 109 of the treaty stipulated that the three riparian states of the Euphrates, at that time Turkey, France for its Syrian mandate and the United Kingdom for its mandate of Iraq, had to reach a mutual agreement on the use of its water and on the construction of any hydraulic installation. An agreement between Turkey and Iraq signed in 1946 required Turkey to report to Iraq on any hydraulic changes it made on the Tigris-Euphrates river system, and allowed Iraq to construct dams on Turkish territory to manage the flow of the Euphrates. Turkey and Syria completed their first dams on the Euphrates, the Keban Dam and the Tabqa Dam, respectively, within 1 year of each other, and filling of the reservoirs commenced in 1975. At the same time, the area was hit by severe drought and river flow toward Iraq was reduced from 15.3 cubic kilometers, 3.7 cubic miles, in 1973 to 9.4 cubic kilometers, 2.3 cubic miles, in 1975. This led to an international crisis during which Iraq threatened to bomb the Tabqa Dam. An agreement was eventually reached between Syria and Iraq after intervention by Saudi Arabia and the Soviet Union. A similar crisis, although not escalating to the point of military threats, occurred in 1981 when the Keban Dam reservoir had to be refilled after it had been almost emptied to temporarily increase Turkey's hydroelectricity production. In 1984, Turkey unilaterally declared that it would ensure a flow of at least 500 cubic meters, 18,000 cubic feet, per second, or 16 cubic kilometers, 3.8 cubic miles, per year, into Syria, and in 1987 a bilateral treaty to that effect was signed between the two countries. Another bilateral agreement from 1989 between Syria and Iraq settles the amount of water flowing into Iraq at 60% of the amount that Syria receives from Turkey. In 2008, Turkey, Syria and Iraq instigated the Joint Trilateral Committee, JTC, on the management of the water in the Tigris-Euphrates basin, and on September 3, 2009 a further agreement was signed to this effect. On April 15, 2014, Turkey began to reduce the flow of the Euphrates into Syria and Iraq. The flow was cut off completely on May 16, 2014. The Euphrates now terminates at the Turkish-Syrian border. This is in violation of an agreement reached in 1987 in which Turkey committed to releasing a minimum of 500 cubic meters, 18,000 cubic feet, of water per second at the Turkish-Syrian border.